Welcome to Holistic Health for Happy Kids, the podcast where we dive into the root causes of children's health challenges and explore natural solutions to help little ones thrive. I'm Lisa, a passionate paediatric naturopath and mum of 3, dedicated to empowering parents with practical tips and expert insights to raise healthy, happy kids. Each episode will unpack common childhood health concerns like allergies, eczema, fussy eating, and gut health, and share evidence-based advice to support your child's wellness naturally. Let's create a generation of thriving children, one holistic step at a time. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Hello, welcome to another episode of the podcast, Holistic Health for Happy Kids. And today we're joined by Sonya Reynolds. And today we're talking about hidden disabilities and real challenges from a mother's perspective. So Sonya Reynolds is a Sydney-based nutritionist and life coach with over 16 years of experience. She provides holistic online nutrition and coaching consultation to clients in Sydney and throughout Australia. But her special focus area includes natural epilepsy management, and this is based on her unique perspective that she has through her own journey with her daughter's diagnosis of pediatric epilepsy and successfully treating it naturally. So welcome to the podcast, Sonya.
Thanks, Lisa, for having me.
No problem. Thanks for fitting me into your busy day.
Always.
So this is a really interesting topic. I think we're going to have lots and lots to discuss. But do you want to just start off and tell me a little bit about your child's journey and when you first sort of realized that something was up?
Thank you. My daughter was developing as expected, and at 3 years of age, she suddenly started having seizures. But interestingly, on the night that she started having the seizures, we didn't even know that they were actually seizures, Lisa. As you know, there's many types of seizures. And with hers, her eyes were rolling back in her head, and then she would keep watching the TV and look at us and smile and then go back and do it again. And I was watching her and I thought, my child's dying in front of my eyes, like incredibly scary. I can still picture it. And I called the ambulance and I said to them, I am not getting off the phone until you're here. And thankfully they were there very quickly. And then we had the experience of being in the hospital setting and her seizures constantly changing. And thankfully, within a day, we knew that she'd been diagnosed with epilepsy. We had no idea about epilepsy. It had never been in our, in our community, in our environment. And so we had an incredibly steep learning curve because her seizures were so severe that she was having subclinical seizures at night. So what that means is you're not seeing them, but the brain waves, the majority of them were epileptic activity. The impact of that was that she went from developing as expected to now no longer able to speak and communicate, nonverbal, back in nappies. And at age 5, I probably think of that as the worst time of her condition. She was unable to be left alone. She had to wear a little helmet because she had these myoclonic drops where she would go from being conscious and communicating with you to literally, hitting the deck because she would have this seizure.
And would this be considered then like one of the more severe forms of epilepsy?
Yeah. So very severe form of epilepsy. Her type was, she had a combination type, but the one that was subclinical in her sleep was continuous spike and wave, or it used to be called ESES. So if you ever look it up, you'll probably see ESES, but that's basically this continuous spike and wave in sleep. And when this was before, Google was really around. So you kind of fish around and you'd have a look in, Facebook and try and find other families and say, hey, has anyone's child got this? And at the time, I couldn't really find anyone in Australia. I found someone in the US, and it was all pretty doom and gloom, to be honest, reading their experiences. And as a result of that, and me being a qualified nutritionist, I went to the hospital because none of the medications were working. Like nothing stopped her seizures, and she was getting worse and worse and worse. And genuinely thought that, my child wouldn't
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
And, as you know, being a parent, you'll do whatever it takes for your child. And so for me, I started advocating for her to do the ketogenic diet. And again, this was before the ketogenic diet was popular. So there was a unit in the hospital. There was a long wait list, and you had to, be failing medicines like we were. And then we started a very strict ketogenic diet that you are measuring it to the gram, like everything's measured. And for example, you're having 4 parts of fat to 1 part protein. So it's heavily fat. And your recipes are put into a spreadsheet where you're tallying up, an Excel spreadsheet where you're tallying up exactly what the food is and weighing it up. And we did that for 6 months. And within that time, her seizures dropped very significantly. And by the time the end of that 6 months, we'd reduced her seizures by 50%. So more than any other medications, diet alone changed her epileptic activity, which is phenomenal.
Isn't it interesting that you had to fail medications for diet to be considered as an option instead of having to fail diet before you go on to medications?
Yeah. And look, you and I know that it's so funny that I hear it's not funny, it's sad actually, that, I have parents coming to me and they are told point blank that diet doesn't matter. Whatever you put in their mouth doesn't matter. And I say, actually, it's the opposite to that without being, you know, so stressed out and putting too much on your plate, but you can start with very simple effective strategies like even eating in a low glycemic
Mm.
style of eating and still reduce seizures. So I completely disagree with that suggestion that diet doesn't matter, and it does. And then after that we did a year and a half more, so 2 years in total, but the extra year and a half, we did the modified Atkins diet. So it's much more flexible on protein. You're looking at about 30% of intake. You're looking at about 50% of your intake being fat, and then your 20% being carbohydrates. So it's more flexible in this world. I think the hardest thing about the keto diet is that it's just so normalized for kids to eat so much junk, to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
honest.
exactly. To have 70, 80% refined carbohydrates of their diet. And so when she was 3 to 5 years of age, she was constantly seizing no matter what.
What we did, yeah.
And then what age did she get diagnosed with an intellectual disability?
So quite quickly, by the time she was 4, we were doing psychometric testing, and she was diagnosed as severely intellectually disabled. And the more that we did, and introducing the keto diet, and then we also from that point we also did medical cannabis, which again I had to advocate very strongly for, which I think is really unfortunate. And it's not a magic bullet, but
Mm.
it was our magic bullet.
Yeah.
And once she got the right dose of CBD oil, we stopped all her seizures, and she was tested again and she was mild intellectual disability. You don't go from severe to mild, so it's
Yeah.
significant.
So
Yeah.
the kind of I guess the damage of the continual seizures was partially reversed once you got the seizures under control.
Yeah. And what we know is that when you're sleeping, that's when you're assimilating all your information.
Yeah.
And so the fact that she was never really sleeping because of those subclinical seizures, and she no longer has this continuous spike and wave. And she's nearly 17 now, so it's been a long journey. And she's within a support unit at a high school, and she's very social, and it's that
Yeah.
classic invisible disability where people are like, oh, you can't tell anything's wrong.
Yeah.
And you know people are saying that as a kindness, right?
Yeah.
But it does sometimes feel like you then have to explain the things that impacts them. However, we're incredibly lucky. We've had an incredibly lucky experience. But I fully believe if we didn't advocate for the keto diet and CBD, we would not be in the position that we are now. And unfortunately, a lot of my time with my clients, I'm really giving them the energy to then go and advocate for themselves with the medical system.
Yeah.
And that's not to say everyone's anti it, but unfortunately, the tide is against it.
It's just a matter of asking questions, though, and just questioning the treatment that you're being given, and not in an argumentative or a
Mm.
disrespectful way, but
Mm.
something as simple as a baby goes on to reflux medication. Very different, very, very simple situation, but just
Mm.
questioning what else can be done. Like, is there any lifestyle, any diet change, any probiotics that you can do before you go to the medication? It's just exactly what you say, just advocating for your child.
But
Um,
also, you don't know what you don't know,
yeah,
because unless you're like, we're lucky, we're in our profession, we know all these, amazing nutrients we can use, probiotics we can use, gut testing we can use. We know all that, but someone without our sort of clinical expertise, they don't necessarily know that there are, in addition to, it doesn't have to be alternative, right?
yes.
It's in addition to or complementary to. So just knowing that there's people like us out there that can support them to, you can have the medication. She stayed on the medication for a long time as well. We very, very, very slowly weaned it off. And I think a mistake is sometimes people go from being on it to not being on it, Lisa. And what you have to do is you just really slowly titrate it down. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling anyone to take down medicine, but not to remove it really quickly and then say, oh no, there's all these seizures, because there will be rebound seizures. So you've got to be really careful
Mm.
about, making decisions around medications. You can't
And
just,
finding a medical team that you can work with collaboratively,
yes.
where you can have these discussions on how to change things, not just to leave medication as they are, because that's kind of the safest medical legal place to be.
And I used to hide a lot, Lisa. Like, I didn't want them to judge me. And maybe it was my self-confidence, but I used to be doing things in the background, get it going, and then go, oh, by the way, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
So just even feeling confident enough to say, you know what, I am doing this, I'm also doing that. And just because the more that they hear that,
Yeah.
they're going to say, actually, I heard that helped. Yeah, if you want to try that, you can try that. This worked for my other patient. I think providing that data and evidence to the doctors or whoever's your supporting practitioner is really helpful for them too.
Yeah. I remember after my daughter's last open heart surgery, and she was still really fatigued 6 months later.
Yeah.
And I should have thought of it sooner, but you often don't see the wood for the trees when it's your own kids. But I was like, oh, duh, she needs coenzyme Q10. So I gave her coenzyme Q10, and she was like a new woman within like days. So I mentioned it to my cardiologist when I saw him again, and he looked at me and was like, oh. I don't know. I was like, oh wow, like probably all your clients who have just had heart surgery would really
Would
benefit from
benefit.
taking
Yeah.
coenzyme Q10. And I even wrote it in the letter. Mother has started giving her coenzyme Q10 and I'm okay with that or something. It's like it was just such a foreign concept to him.
Oh, the letters afterwards. I'd always read it and go, Mother has, and I
Yeah.
go,
Mother's gone off script. So how did you feel back when you were given the diagnosis of severe intellectual disability and along with the epilepsy? Like how did you feel and how did you deal with that at that time?
probably not that well. I
Yeah.
even want to cry just thinking about it. Something in me didn't want to accept it. Now, I don't know if that's right or wrong, right? You're just doing what you're doing. And I went to, it was really hard. I always loved her for her. Wherever we were going, I was going there with her, but I wasn't going to go there as a passenger. I was going to go there as a leader, I guess. But I didn't even mean that. It's just the way I coped, I guess. And I think we know this from being in practice as well, Lisa. I think we meet so many mums that are just not prepared to give up or take no for an answer. So I think that mother sort of not taking no or what's the best life I can get her. And maybe it's a bit of taking action sometimes takes you away from sitting in perhaps grief, right?
Yeah, redirecting your energy and
Redirecting your energy. And so for me, I really oscillated between grieving this person who I thought, was my firstborn. I didn't, you think your life's going to look like this. So I think the grief really shook me and my husband, but we kind of took it in turns falling apart.
yeah.
I don't know if this was your experience, but yeah, very much falling apart, not pulling myself together, but I guess that's what resilience is, that rubber band of just picking yourself up again. And so that's probably what, led me to all the advocacy with the diet and the medical cannabis because I just well, and having said that, I never knew that, like when your child's diagnosed with those things, you also don't think that's going to change either, right? So the fact that, when we had to do psychometric testing, so I just want to, have a caveat that as part of being placed in a support unit or getting funding, you've got to follow a lot of different or undertake a lot of testing to prove this. So I don't think I necessarily would have done any of that psychometric testing way back when because I knew that, some obviously she'd been developing differently to how she was then. So I knew that, you know. So I've sometimes getting the diagnosis and getting the testing done is helpful for the funding
Yeah.
and for the support and the NDIS. But then it's like you've got to just sort of push it aside as well. With obviously, everyone's got a different experience with their disability. That was
Yeah.
just for us. I think part of dealing with it was just to get on with it. And, we just lived our life. Like we went on holiday, Lisa. We just got on with it. And again, I don't know if I had denial, but I'm like, yeah, we're going to go to Fiji. Can we go to Fiji? Yes, you can only go if it's close to the hospital. Okay, yeah, we can go there. You know, so
And in the midst of all this, then you had another baby as well.
so I had my other child. My other child was one when
Okay, yeah.
my eldest started having seizures, and she doesn't remember a lot of the trauma,
Mm.
but she's grown up just knowing that that's her sister. Like you
Yeah.
just that's your normal, isn't it?
But that must have been just incredibly challenging to balance a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old who had to wear a helmet because she could just fall over at any time. Like, how on earth did you juggle that?
I don't think I juggled it very well, but I had someone, I did my best. We had an amazing carer come and live with us for 6 months
Okay,
when
yeah.
we started the keto diet because it's that hard. So, this amazing woman came into our life and actually lived with us while we did that really strict keto. And I was really lucky to have, my mum was very involved. But I think it's your normal, isn't it, Lisa? You just get on with it.
Mm.
But I think I've blocked a lot.
I know you get on with it, but literally, like, how do you even cope? It's hard enough with
Mm.
two toddlers getting swimming
Mm.
lessons, getting people on the toilet, off the toilet, into bed. But then with a child who like you can't even turn your back for a second, it's just the mind boggles, really.
Do you know what? That was a really good question because I started seeing a clinical psychologist for me,
Yeah.
and I didn't work for some time because I just had no capacity to do that. And I think a sense of humor and just joy and finding the joy
Yeah.
really just. But I think he very much, how people talk about, robot mode. I was probably in a bit of robot mode, right? Which
Yeah.
I don't necessarily, I'm not advocating for
Yeah.
robot
Yeah. Yeah.
mode. But it is what it is. And I did it. But I look back now and someone will say something and I'll go, I don't remember that. So I think there's a real sense of I blocked a lot of it out. And I think I really struggled to accept some of it as well. So I think it's only now I'm still unpacking that time. And, I still see a clinical psychologist. And we're even talking about how as a teenager, we went to access a service for children with disabilities and learning disabilities. And my child, as a teenager, said to me, "That's not me. Why are you bringing me here?" And having to say that to her, you need this. And she's like, "No, I don't." As a teenager does, but also really having to learn about her identity not being her disability and in fact and part of being a teenager is finding that place as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas
And
when they're
teenage,
little kids they don't have that, they're not advocating for themselves.
no, they just want to fit in, really, at the end of the day. They don't want to be special. They don't want to be highlighted. They just want to fit in. And whenever we got diagnosed with, or my daughter got diagnosed with congenital heart disease in utero, I mean, my husband wouldn't be great at expressing our feelings, I would have to say. So we went to see a psychologist at Westmead at the Heart Centre for Children. So like they specialize in this situation. And I
Yeah.
don't even know what the psychologist said. I think she asked like one question. And me and my husband sat and cried for an hour. I don't even know if the psychologist said anything else. We sat, both of us bawled our heads out for an hour. We walked out and went, all right,
That was nice.
we're
Yeah.
good. And that was kind of it. We just cried and cried and cried. And then we walked out, yeah, yeah, all right, let's go. But it's about getting it out of your body, I guess, in whatever way that you can.
Yeah, crying. Yes, I'm a massive crier. I could even cry listening to you
Yeah,
crying. So
probably
I
quite.
cried a lot and I still cry a lot and I make mistakes. And, this morning, even sometimes it's a bit like, what's a teenager? Because you're kind of saying, can you do X, Y, and Z? And that they need more support.
Mm.
And so having a fight about getting ready to go to school and, I felt like that sort of, oh, I'm failing at this, but you're just doing the best that you can.
So what does a typical day look like for you and your child and your family?
For us, we're like any teenage family where, everyone's going to four different places and it's, busy. Uh, with my child with a disability, they need more scaffolding. They need more support. We still, being the practitioner I am, she has a smoothie that's like a medical smoothie. So it's got like all the things in it. And so she can't necessarily, she probably could, but the blender's tricky and other things like that. So we will tend to make her breakfast, whereas her younger sibling, we expect her to make her own breakfast.
Yeah.
We still support with getting food ready for the school day, whereas sometimes other children would be making their own lunches by now as well. And then it gets into that tricky place of, come on, you could be doing this. This is just that sort of behavior. A couple of afternoons a week, she takes herself to therapy, so speech therapy. She's been doing that intensively for a long time because, as I mentioned, she became nonverbal. So the better she got, the more she could speak. But there's still gaps. And so we prioritize speech therapy and NDIS, as you
Yeah.
probably experienced, and a lot of your clients would have experienced, changed our funding. And so other, we're accessing occupational therapy to help with things like this, opening jars, but doing things that come easily to other people. And so we lost that. And so we decided, well, we'll put it all into her speech and her communication, because where her seizures were was in her language part of her brain. So that's why it was so heavily impacted, and that's why we focus so much on that. And then, yeah, she tends to need quite a bit more, I would say, scaffolding and support. But we have taught her how to catch transport. We've taught her how to get around. Like, she's very independent. Sometimes we're like, come back. So she lives an incredibly rich life with us, but she'll come home and say, that child called me a sped, which is special education. So she faces discrimination
Yeah.
a lot. And that's really hard, Lisa.
Yeah. And so communication then would be one of her biggest struggles.
Yeah. And still not understanding, like, someone put this in a really good like example, understanding like good and bad people, like not understanding, like, I know it's not as black and white as,
Yeah.
but having that sort of
Judging
understanding,
characters.
judgment,
Yeah.
yes, that sort of. And look, a lot of teenagers are still finding that, right? So even in our 20s, we're still figuring that out. But for me, it's just around that safety as well. But yeah, I mean, from what we went through to where she's now, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like what are some of the misconceptions that people have that you come across about epilepsy and about, well, is she still classed as having epilepsy?
It's complicated. Previously, she had clear EEGs
Yeah.
and hadn't had a seizure for over 5 years. So she was pretty much cleared.
Yeah.
But then in the last 2 years, she had one a year. They're not severe. They're quite um, more auras and things like that. But I think the biggest thing is not all people with epilepsy look the same. It doesn't express the same. Epilepsy can be really severe seizure types to having, an odd absent seizure, right?
Yeah.
There's a spectrum. I think the biggest misconception is that I never knew that the epilepsy could be involved in an intellectual disability. I think that was the biggest misconception that even I had. I just didn't know. And obviously there's many, many people with epilepsy that it has no impact on their brain function. But, the medications have a lot of impact on mood, sleep. Some of them make you more sleepy, some make you less sleepy. What I see in clinic a lot is mood issues, lots of rage and anger can come from a lot of these medications, brain fog, fatigue. So see this a lot. And people may not know that. They'll think, oh, yeah, epilepsy, you can take a tablet and you'll stop the seizures. But a lot of times when we say that a drug has failed someone, it's usually because the side effects of the drugs are so significant that they can't live with them.
Yeah.
So I
I mean,
think that's
obviously,
another misconception. People don't understand that just taking a tablet doesn't necessarily, you know, give you a great quality of life all the time.
and even the minor side effects, like compared to those, the minor side effects like constipation or slower gut motility, that can still affect your sleep, affect your mood. So even the really probably, the take it for granted this will be a side effect, they're still going to definitely compromise your quality of life. We will definitely get you onto the podcast another time to talk all about the keto diet and what that means, because I'm sure people are just listening going, yes, but tell me more about the keto diet. We will come back to that, but that's a whole podcast in of itself for sure.
I'm so passionate about that. Thank you. Yes, because as I said, there's lots of nuances to even doing a keto diet. So, don't just think that you have to do these mega doses of fat with these kids. You can still see benefits for them with lower amounts of fat.
Yeah, for sure. And so how has your daughter's condition affected their ability to, to make friends and have a social life and go to social activities, birthday parties, all those sorts of things?
Probably that's been one of the biggest impacts. Um, Kids don't mean it. It happens. They're othered. They are different. As I said, they were called speds. We try and have a very full family life. We have family friends. We have try and do that. She's made some really special long-term friends. There are a small group of them, and she's very keen to open that network out. She's very keen to live like a typical, like these silly Netflix, high
Yeah.
school shows, and you're like, that's not real. She's very social and outgoing and a real party girl, but yeah, she just doesn't have those same opportunities, which is really sad. But that's what we were trying to access recently. What I've noticed more with better NDIS funding is that there's more opportunities, like a place called Cohive in the inner west is all about people with disabilities from 17 to 35. I'm no way affiliated with them. I just think they're great. 17 to 35, and giving them access to TAFE, social outings, holidays away without parents. Like that's so
Yeah,
significant, Lisa,
yeah,
because she was saying to me, I want to go to Bali with my mates. And I'm like, I don't think, but if she could do access it through that sort of place. So we're so lucky now that, there's a Stellar Experiences down in the Sutherland Shire, and that's very much a similar service where people access it through their NDIS funding for the most part. But it allows for these teenagers to have a community, Lisa, and expand their network, because
yeah,
I really do believe that, the loneliness, the depression, the anxiety in a lot of these kids could be,
yeah,
reduced with this community.
yeah, because it's not that their condition is causing the anxiety, it's probably the social exclusion. And to be honest, being a teenager, I think is just soul destroying anyway, a lot of the time. It's just so worried about people and friendships and everything. It's hard enough at the best of times.
I agree.
So what's the one thing that you wish that the general public understood about parenting a child with an invisible disability?
I was saying this to you earlier. I think it's really important for you to just have a go at talking to that person about their experience. I don't want to cancel anyone. They can say, you know, they're just learning themselves, like educating yourself around invisible disabilities and language is really helpful. There's some really good resources talking about how you can talk about person first, so person with a disability, as opposed to identity first, where you're saying, epileptic person.
Yeah.
So talking about person with epilepsy. So I think that's something I really encourage people to have a look at. I think we've got, neurodivergent, neurospicy, whatever you want to call it, more and more kids. And so I think there's quite a community of people experiencing this as well, invisible disabilities. So, I think reaching out to other parents who you think could really just vent to or be a friend to would be my main thing. I've been so lucky that I've had friendships that are quite, open to discussing that. And so that's what I would say is just be open to these people that you may not see and give it a go. And I really think that you can't be offended by someone having a go to understand you and your family.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned like delving into Facebook groups early on in your journey. Do you
Mm.
still think, I think Facebook groups can be good and supportive, but I think they can also just not be great. Like what's your feeling on joining these different Facebook groups?
It's a great question. So I joined a Facebook group for epilepsy and found it so traumatic.
Mm,
A lot of people were just posting videos of their child in severe seizures, obviously looking for help, saying, what do you think this is? And I had to mute it, Lisa. I don't know if you're like that. I can't. So I will only access that group if I'm looking for something in particular, and then I'll exit it. I won't stay in there. But that's just me protecting my mental health. I joined a ketogenic parents group when I was part of the ketogenic parents group. I'm still friendly. Like these people all over Australia, and we still talk. We're not super close friends, but we're friendly and we chat. And, all their children have epilepsy. So we have a shared sort of history and experience. So that's been really nice. But yeah, I'd say join the group, then mute it and only go in when you want to.
yeah. Because of course, like goes without saying, is that having a child with a condition doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be friends with the person. But you will find obviously the gold in amongst the group. I'm meeting up next week with a mom that I know from when my daughter was in hospital 14 years ago, and then she moved back to the UK. So I've only seen her like 12 years ago the last time. I'm so excited to see her and her daughter because nobody understands really. Nobody can possibly understand, nor do you need them or want people to understand.
Mm.
But it's really nice to be able to see her again and catch up with her and her daughter. And yeah, that's lovely. But yeah, I used to come home from the hospital and tell Cahill, like my husband, like, oh my God, I saw this today and this happened, like with about all the different families on the ward. And he just said to me, just stop telling me all of
Yeah,
these stories. Like, I was
yeah.
like, yeah, that's fine. But I'm there every day. I can't just mute the stories when you're actually in hospital. So, but how do you deal with that? Not just your own trauma, but then all the other traumatic experiences of all the other children on the ward or the children that you see in the hospital. Like it's a hard world to be in.
Yeah, I still remember being in the hospital overnight, the dings and the just the lack of
Crying.
sleep, the severe lack of sleep, the just exhaustion and the fear. And yeah, for me, the hospital is something that's so hard for our clients. Like just feel so much compassion for us and what we went through and may continue to go through, and for our clients as well. But you don't have to be in the groups as well, don't you think? Like, don't
Yeah,
join
yeah, yeah.
the groups. Like, don't, that's their experience. And sometimes people are, there's those really strong advocates, which are amazing. And they're kind of saying this is the only way to do it. And then you kind of get like that in your head. And so I've never been that person, Lisa. Like I've never been the person, and you probably know this from knowing me just in, in my industry as well. I'm not the person in the Facebook group telling everyone what to do, even if I know the answer. I really, unless someone asks me directly, I'm not going to go in there sort of fishing for clients or, giving unsolicited advice, because unsolicited advice can sometimes be the worst advice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If it wasn't asked for, it's generally not wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
And so one last question, and that would be, what are your hopes for your child's future? It's a
Oh,
big
when I
question.
saw this, yeah, what are my hopes? I hope for the best, and I'm
Yeah.
just open to what, like, it even makes me teary talking about it. I'll be honest with you. Up until very recently, I was quite despondent about the future, because it's just this, I don't, if you can't see it, you can't be it. Like, I just
Yeah.
couldn't see people living with disabilities. I think there's more, there's more conversation now. But we went to Cohive and we saw kids that were, 18, 19. And through the sport of this place, we heard the parents talk about their children's experiences. And Tim and I held hands and we said, this is the first time we've ever felt excited about the possibilities for our child, that there's someone that gets our child, can help our child. And our world had gone from, very narrow to, like, keeping her alive, to, oh,
Yeah.
wow, like there's possibilities for our child. So my hope is that we continue to grow and develop in this disability space, so that our kids have as many opportunities as they would like. But fundamentally, all I really want is a happy child.
Mm. Yeah. What did I read yesterday? That you're only,
As happy as your happiest child.
yeah.
Your saddest child.
Yeah,
What is
yeah.
it?
I can't remember. Only as happy as, anyway.
Yes, that
Love.
one.
Yeah, yeah, so true. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your own personal experience with invisible disability. And as I say, we will definitely get you back in the future to talk more about a ketogenic diet and how that can help and what that actually means. Because, as you say, it's been popularized in the last 10 years from a weight loss point of view, but it's
Mm.
not necessarily going to be the same when you do it with the child for medical reasons. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me. So Sonya Reynolds, you can find Sonya on Instagram and you can find her website, sonyareynolds.com.au, and I will link both below. And yeah, have a great day, Sonya.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to Holistic Health for Happy Kids. I hope you found today's episode helpful and inspiring on your journey to raise thriving, healthy little ones. Remember, small, consistent changes can lead to big transformations. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at The Pediatric Naturopath for more tips, tools, and inspiration. If you've got a question or a topic you'd love to hear about, please send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care and keep supporting your kids in the most natural, nurturing ways possible.